We're very fortunate at the Thoresby Society that we have the collections of John Killingbeck, an amateur historian who collected a vast array of different materials for his proposed history of Hunslet. Amongst the items he left us are a series of drawings which were done by his father, and he himself were looking at a drawing of the old town school. Now, we have no exact date for this building, but we do know that William Massey, who lived from 1624 to 1699, who was a very wealthy salter of Hunslet Lane, had married Thomas Fenton's daughter, Mary. This match was a very successful one, and they had 8 children together. He'd been Mayor of Leeds from 1689 to 90 and played an active role in local society. But what must have been so tragic for William and his wife Mary was that none of those 8 children survived to adulthood. What was he going to do then with his vast wealth? Well, he clearly loved children, and so in his will, he gave the interest on £100, a vast amount of money at the time, to support the minister of the chapel, but also to provide a stipend for a schoolmaster who was to educate 5 poor children up to the age of 13. Now, his widow leased the house and land called Brown's Farm, adjoining Hunslet Moor, to a nephew, Abraham Fenton. But he proved to be a rogue and a vagabond. He's described as being a notoriously selfish individual, and he failed to pay the money, and so he was taken to court and eventually had to cough up. Now, sometime between 1690 and 1730, this building must have been constructed to provide accommodation for the children of Hunslet and their schoolmaster. The brick building was quite spacious inside, and it was quite light due to the large number of windows at the side. It was the perfect place where you could hold the court of the manor of Hunslet. And so in an evening, it was not always used for education, it was also used as a social centre. We know that this very fine brick building with its large numbers of windows, which provided a light, bright environment, was used not only to educate poor children, but it was also used for the Great Court Leet and its meetings. On the 25th of October 1739, we know that the court met in this room. Ralph Lepton, gentleman and steward of the court, presided, and the jury of 12 honest members of the community was sworn in. Business was brisk. Robert Wrigglesworth was fined 2 shillings for allowing his swine to go abroad, being a common nuisance to the people of Hunslet. Another 16 were fined for exactly that same offence. So what you have to imagine is that Hunslet Moor at this time must have been covered with these rather vicious swine grazing upon the common. We also had John Wildman found £1, a huge amount, for putting his cattle amongst the waste of the manor called Hunslet Moor and to pasture there, he having no right to do so. There were also various offences linked to the woolen industry. Nicholas Burlow had planted a wool hedge there without authority, which he was using to dry his washed wool on, despite being warned before not to do so. He'd been warned by the lords of the manor that he couldn't have that right, and yet he carried on doing so. And so he'd been fined a shilling for ignoring them. 4 people were also fined the same sum for setting up tenter frames on the land. Those were used for stretching the cloth. Now, the thing is that this school continued right until 1829, when it was decided that this structure was simply no longer worth repairing, and they started a voluntary subscription to raise the money to improve the facilities by knocking it down and building a brand new school. But 20 years passed and still not enough money had been raised. So on the 12th of March 1840, a committee was appointed to inquire into the value of the property, which was adjacent to the churchyard, with a view to selling that off and finding a new site for the school. Shall we just suffice to say that even that took another 4 years before anything was done. Things even then moved slowly in the realms of education.